Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to our first town hall. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We're going to get started in just a moment. I'm going to have my Director of Operations, Pascal, introduce herself and just let you know a little bit about how you can submit questions. We've received nearly 100 questions already, but we're still going to be taking some more. So Pascal, can you just go over some of the ground rules here, and then we'll get right into the Q&A.
Okay, great. Hello, everyone. My name is Pascal Jean Giles. I'm the Senator's Outreach Director. So for answering questions today, we have a Q&A box for everyone who is on the Zoom participating. You can use that to ask any questions and we will see it and the Senator will answer. For anyone who is watching with us on Facebook, you can put your questions in the comment section, and we have members of our staff there monitoring so that they can send us those questions as well. Okay.
Great. Well, thank you again. And it is a pleasure to be here to have a chance to talk with you and to hear from all of you in Rockland and Westchester who've joined us today. I'm sorry we can't do this in person, but look forward to when we can get back into the non-virtual space and get out there and see each other face to face. I'm Senator Elijah Reichlin-Melnick, and it is truly an honor to be your representative in Albany now for almost 4 months since I was elected last year, proudly representing Ramapo, Clarkstown, Orangetown, and Ossining in Rockland and Westchester counties. The purpose of today's event is basically just for me to have a chance to hear from you, to answer some questions. As I mentioned, we've received around 100 questions from people who registered with the Zoom link. I know we'll get more this evening. I'll do my best to answer as many questions as I possibly can. And apologies in advance if we're not able to get to your question. We're going to be running this event for a little over an hour till just before 7:15. I'll cover as much as I can because I know there are a lot of issues. We've got issues in this district of education, healthcare, property taxes, small businesses, so much that we have to talk about because this is a wonderful place to be. I grew up here in Rockland County, went through the Nyack public school system, and then moved back a year or two after college after starting my career as an elementary school teacher. It's an honor to be here with you this evening, representing the community that I grew up in and having an opportunity to be your voice up in the state legislature in Albany. These are difficult times. We have been struggling with the virus, with the pandemic for more than a year now. I'm hoping that we are coming towards the final stages and getting to a place soon where we can truly get back to normal. But in the meantime, I know we are not quite there yet, and there is so much work to be done to get our economy back on track, to get public health back on track, make sure that we don't lose a single other citizen and a resident of our community to this horrible disease. And so I hope all of you have been, as best as possible, staying safe in these difficult times, you and your loved ones, and making sure that we have a community that we can really come back to after this pandemic has fully concluded. So with that, I would love to start taking questions. Pascal's going to be reading some of the questions we've received. And Pascal, why don't you go ahead?
Okay, so the first question is from Fred from Suffern. Are Albany politics surprising you?
So are Albany politics surprising me? Well, yes and no. I had the honor of working for State Senator James Skoufis prior to getting elected, who represents North Rockland and parts of Orange County. So I had a little bit of exposure to Albany politics. But what is surprising, I guess, is just how crazy things have been in the midst of the COVID pandemic and also in the midst of the ongoing scandals and whatever you want to call it with our governor. It is a very strange time to be here when on a regular basis, we're seeing news stories about how the governor's office has been misleading the legislature, misleading the public. Obviously, all of the issues with women accusing him of inappropriate behavior. And so it is a very strange time to be in Albany in that respect. But what is nice about being there is, frankly, we have a new legislature with new priorities and with new energy. There is a stereotype of people in government who have been there for many, many years. That's not true in the state Senate right now. And in fact, more than half of the members of the state Senate were elected in either 2018 or 2020. And so voters have spoken. They've elected many new members of both parties. And it's exciting to work with colleagues that are also new to the system. who do not have years of experience there and are willing to come in, shake things up a little bit, and get results for the people that we represent.
Okay, so the next question is from Terry from New City. Will school districts in New York State get full funding in the budget this year?
So it's a great question. I began my career, as I mentioned, teaching public school. And I taught in an inner city school district up in Connecticut in the city of New Haven that was surrounded by more affluent districts. And the role of money in education, it matters. It's not the only thing, but there's a reason that we value things, and when we need to consider something important as educating our children educating our kids, we should be investing in it to make sure that they get the education that they need. And so when I ran for office last year, one of my focuses was in ensuring that the state was going to be supporting our public school districts. And I am delighted to say that the budget that we passed a few weeks ago, it really does that. It's the largest increase in state aid coming back to public schools probably ever, a significant increase. And in our district alone, over $22 million coming back to local school districts. Some of our school districts, such as Ossining or Nanuet, which were just chronically shortchanged by New York State, are seeing increases of over, in Ossining's case, about 27% increase, in Nanuet, over a 50% increase in the money coming back in from state aid, but every district is benefiting. And not only does this help kids, and it helps give the education that they need, and so we can afford to hire the teachers and the counselors and the support staff to deliver that education, it really helps taxpayers. And I think we'll talk about this, I hope to anyway, in a little bit. But the fact is that many school districts in the 38th Senate District here have already announced they're proposing budgets with a 0% increase in school taxes. And that is a tremendous relief for so many of us and so many residents of this district, because we are really burdened and have been for quite a long time in Rockland and Westchester with some of the highest property taxes in the country. And so to have the state step up, provide the support to public education to help our kids and help our families, and make sure that property taxes are not going to keep escalating at the rate they have been. That is what our state government should have been doing all along, and it is what I'm proud to have supported in just the first few months on the job.
Okay, we have a question from Stephen from Spring Valley. Could Senator Reichlin speak about the passage of the New York State constitutional amendment that would create parity between mental and physical health? The April 2nd NAMI newsletter mentions his press conference on the subject. One of the great disparities is in the funding provided for residential solutions for individuals with developmental disabilities versus those with psychiatric conditions. Would this amendment affect that?
Okay, thank you, Stephen, for your question. So I have sponsored legislation in the state Senate, along with Assembly member Dee Dee Barrett in the state Assembly, that would put a constitutional amendment in the New York State Constitution and get mental health care on the same, the same plateau as physical health care. Right now, our state constitution's mental health provisions haven't been updated in more than 80 years, since the 1930s. And what it says is that the state shall provide for the physical health, but it doesn't speak to mental health. It says local governments may help provide for the mental health care of their residents. Not that they must, not that they shall, but that they may. And so of course they may not. And the result of this really, unequal treatment of physical and mental health care has been that when governments look to cut, they look to cut mental health first. We saw that this year in the state budget. Governor Cuomo's executive budget that he proposed back in February proposed closing Rockland Children's Psychiatric Center, which serves some of the most vulnerable and some of the most needy people in our community. Kids with extreme mental health needs that absolutely depend on that inpatient treatment to help get them through a crisis. The governor proposed closing it. I was proud to join a bipartisan coalition of lawmakers from both houses of the legislature, some of our local elected officials from the county executive on down, and fight back against this proposal. And I'm proud that in the final budget, that did not include a closure of the Children's Psychiatric Center at Rockland Children's Psych Center, because we had to keep that open. We have to prioritize mental health. And my hope is that if we can get this constitutional amendment through, New York's Constitution will finally make it clear that mental health care is health care. It's not a different thing. If you have your physical health in order, but your mental health is not in order, you are going to be in just as much trouble as if you had it the other way around. And we simply need to realize we can't keep treating mental health care as a second-class citizen in the healthcare system. We have got to get people the treatment that they need. And I think that this amendment really will help. And then if people find that they're being deprived, it gives them options and it gives them a recourse, because their constitutional rights under the New York State Constitution would, in that case, be being violated, and they could actually seek to get that remedied. So I hope this will pass. I will be pushing extremely hard to get this through this year, passing it 1 year after, and then it would go to voters for approval, because that's how the process works when we have to change the Constitution in New York State.
Okay. We have Kate from Briarcliff Manor. She's asked, what is being done to overcome vaccine hesitancy in our district? People still seem to have misinformation about the dangers of the vaccine versus the dangers of COVID. Is there a district-wide plan or one for each town or village?
Kate, that is a great question, because we had 3 months or more when I came in where the key issue wasn't necessarily the hesitancy, it was that there were way more people that wanted to get the COVID vaccine than was available. And my office had been overwhelmed with calls from people trying to make appointments, trying to get the vaccine, because of course, this is a life-saving vaccine. We have been dealing with COVID for more than a year now, and it is a disease that has killed over 600,000 Americans, tens of thousands of New Yorkers, and more than a couple million people worldwide, and it continues to grow. In the US alone, we are still losing hundreds of our fellow Americans every single day to this. And so getting people who wanted the vaccines, that was the first step. We've actually really reached that milestone because the supply is there. And as of this week, if you need a COVID vaccine, you can walk in to any of the state-run COVID vaccine centers in New York and get that vaccine. You do not need an appointment anymore if you're going to RCC, the vaccine center in Rockland we fought so hard for, if you're going to the Westchester County Center, or any of the other local vaccine sites run by New York State. So it's there now, and now we do have to turn to making sure that people understand that this vaccine is safe. It is effective. It can truly help save your life. It can save the lives of people in your family, people in your church or your synagogue or your mosque, people that you work with. There is, at this point, no good reason to not take it. And I think that's the message which the government at all levels should be giving, that medical professionals are giving, that there are literally 1 in a million cases or less of any kind of serious side effects. And at the same time, hundreds of people a day still dying. And so whatever risk is out there from the vaccines is absolutely dwarfed by the size of the risk that we face still from this virus. And the CDC announced today that if you're fully vaccinated, take the mask off outdoors, especially if you're not around other people. There are signs that we are getting back to normal. We're almost there, and I think we can get there by this summer if people recognize the safety. And so the state government has been working, the Department of Health, at local levels too, to try to reach communities in their own language. We've got communities in Rockland and in Westchester that may not be fluent in English. We want to make sure they have the information they need. We're partnering, and many local governments and the DOH partnering with faith leaders to talk to their congregations to make sure that the information's out there. Really trying to reach people where they're at, answer questions. This isn't just about do it because we say so. It's about, answering and addressing any truly legitimate questions and making sure that people have the information that they need to understand how significant it is to take this vaccine and to save their lives and to protect all of us in this community from a resurgence from COVID.
We have a question from Cheryl of Nanuet. We received a notice from Suez in November 2020 saying the PFOA MCL exceedance at Suez Water, New York. What is being done to correct this problem? Is the water safe to drink? When will this issue be corrected? And who is monitoring this issue?
Okay, so there is a lot there, but I think, Cheryl, I appreciate the question. What this is asking about for anybody listening today who may not be aware, is this ongoing issue, which was reported last year, that tests done of some of the water supplies in Rockland County showed an elevated level of a couple of chemicals called PFOS and PFAS, which can, in high concentrations, be extremely toxic to people. The concentrations were a little bit above what's allowed by the state. They're still well below what's allowed by the federal government. And so I wouldn't say at the moment that the water is extremely unsafe to drink, but it's extremely concerning in the long run, because the way that these work is they can build up over time. And so it's been a priority for me and for my colleagues in government to try to work with the State Department of Environmental Conservation and with Suez in order to get this cleaned up as quickly as possible. I've contacted, along with Assemblyman Ken Zabrowski and State Senator Skoufis, contacted the DEC, urged them to get on this as quickly as possible and to ensure that Suez Water is taking every single step they need to figure out, first of all, why is there contamination in our water supply? Where did it come from? What are we doing about it? We can't wait 5 or 10 years to get this wrapped up. We need to identify and we need to remediate. And there are technologies there that can do that. Costs money, but we have to make that investment to make sure that our long-term health is preserved. And I'm not going to let this issue drop, because there is nothing more fundamental than making sure that our water is safe to drink, our air is safe to breathe, and that we can go about our lives without having to worry about our health. And so this will remain a priority for me, and I think for all of my colleagues in government. This isn't a Democratic or a Republican issue. This is an issue which touches all of us, and we need to make sure that all of the regulatory authorities, including the state levels, are focusing on this and are making sure that we get remediation as quickly as possible.
We have Ben from Spring Valley who wants to know, what is your agenda for next year to address the problematic East Ramapo school system?
Yeah, well, so actually my agenda, I'm not going to wait till next year. I'm getting to work on it this year. I have introduced legislation that would finally, I think, bring some additional state oversight to the East Ramapo School District. As many people listening may know, East Ramapo has struggled for years with issues of financing, with issues that have caught the attention of the state controller, and in fact, with a federal civil rights lawsuit brought by the Spring Valley NAACP and the New York Civil Liberties Union that culminated in the district losing in federal court and setting up a ward system to give the Black and Latino residents of that district who send their kids to public schools a fair chance to elect members to the school board. And so what it shows is this is a district, in my opinion, that needs additional state oversight. I've introduced a bill, S6052, along with Assemblyman Zabrowski, that would put a monitor in place there with the power to overrule decisions of the school board that are not in the interests of children in that district, that go against the academic and the fiscal improvement plan for the district, that violate state law or state regulations, and to make sure that public money is being spent wisely and is benefiting the kids in that district. This isn't about pitting public school against private school communities, but we need to ensure that everybody who lives in the district, whether they're sending their kids to public school or private school, has the chance to get the kind of education that they want. And right now, there are so many families who use the public schools in East Ramapo that aren't getting that education. I feel lucky to have gone to great public schools and Nyack public schools, and that 15 minutes from where I grew up, there are kids who, because of the district they go to, the zip code they live in, are deprived of that chance is not something we should be okay with. It's not something we can let stand. And so I'll continue to work whatever it takes. I hope we can get this bill through and find solutions that are going to try to help get state oversight of this district and ensure that the kids there get the education they need.
Susanna of Nyack has a question. What work have you done to promote gun safety in New York State?
So that is also a great question, because gun safety is incredibly important for me. It is something that I'm passionate about, and I think that so many of us realize we've lived through an epidemic of gun violence over the last 10 years in this country. We've lived through Sandy Hook, where we had so many children murdered in cold blood in an elementary school. We've lived through Parkland. We've lived through the Pulse nightclub shooting. We've lived through Las Vegas. and just on and on. This year in Boulder, in Indianapolis, in places all over the country. And so whatever we as legislators can do to try to keep our kids and our communities safe from gun violence, that is what we need to focus on. I'm happy that just in the 4 months since I've been there, we focused on a couple of important issues. Earlier this year, the Senate passed legislation that makes it much harder for people to possess and build what are untraceable, what they call ghost guns. And these are weapons that can be assembled basically with parts ordered off the internet and tutorials on putting them together that you could find on YouTube. And the fact is that this poses incredible risks to our communities. Law enforcement has enormous concerns about these untraceable guns because it makes it much harder to crack down on the problem of illegal guns. The Senate has acted on this. I'm looking forward, I hope, to the Assembly doing the same and the governor signing this into law later this year. I also want to mention legislation I recently introduced along with Ken Zabrowski in the Assembly called Alyssa's Law. And this is a bill that I think would really have the potential to save lives in our district and throughout New York if, God forbid, we ever did have a school shooting incident here. Because right now there can be, when these tragedies strike, these can be very fast moving and hard incidents to follow. In Parkland, Florida, when the gunman attacked the school there were miscommunications with law enforcement, a delay in response, and that added to the death toll. And so what this bill would say is that every school in New York State that serves K-12 students would need to install a silent panic alarm system that links directly to local law enforcement. And so again, if God forbid there is some type of shooting or some type of incident like that, we would be able to get police there as soon as possible to react. We could save lives. Every second counts. It's not going to stop every mass shooting out there. It's not going to stop everything, but if we can save one life through doing this, these systems aren't that expensive, and it can really help decrease response time and increase safety of our students and teachers and everybody that works in our schools. So I'm proud to support that. I do hope we can pass that.
Carol from Spring Valley wants to know, how will the middle class tax credit on real estate taxes work?
So the middle class, that's a good question. So some of you may not know, in the budget that was passed about 3 weeks ago, there is a new program in place. It's a property tax circuit breaker program for the middle class. And it covers people who earn under $250,000 a year, who are paying 6% or more of their income towards property tax. And unfortunately, that probably covers quite a lot of people in Rockland and Westchester. And so the circuit breaker tax credit, you would apply for it. And then again, if you're earning under $250,000 a year, paying more than 6% of your income in property taxes, and that would be school tax, town taxes, village taxes, library, fire district taxes, any property taxes, county property taxes. If it's more than 6%, you may be eligible for credits between $250 and $350 for that. It's a start. We have a property tax problem that is out of control, and I don't want to be somebody that's going to claim that this is going to solve that problem. But the reality is it's been a long time since Albany did anything to try to address property tax relief. This is a new program. It's on top of the STAR program. And so if you're already getting STAR, you keep getting STAR. We rejected the governor's proposals to cut back on the STAR program. You keep getting that, and you may qualify for this if you fall into this 6% under $250,000. And my hope is that now that we've got this, not only will it continue, because this was a 3-year program that this budget created, but that we can extend it, not just extend it out further for additional years, but extend it in terms of how much it can provide, how many people it can serve. The estimate is this going to cover about 1.2 million households in New York State, primarily in suburban areas like the one that we live in. New York City actually has lower property taxes. They just have an income tax. We don't think this is a program that's going to really help New York City that much. It should help districts like ours, and that's what it's all about. And so having created this, I will be pushing to get this extended in further budgets and really build this into something that can provide even more meaningful relief to the people that need it. You know, we got seniors on fixed income. We have people that are trying to buy their first houses, trying to afford property taxes, putting their kids through college. it's an enormous burden. And it is why it's a challenge to have people move into this area. We're losing people who grew up here, who would like to afford a house, who would like to raise their families in Rockland and Westchester and cannot and can't afford to come back here. And so they're pursuing opportunities in other states, in other parts of New York. We can't keep up with this because we need to grow our economies and we need to grow our communities. There is a lot going on right now, and I think that this is a program which really should benefit a lot of people in the middle class in our district. And in fact, the one other thing I would say about that is it specifically will help the most for people who are on the lowest end, who are earning $75,000 a year or less. It'll help a little more or a little less than that for people earning $75,000 to $150,000, a little less for people earning $150,000 to $250,000, and then it phases out above $250,000 income. So it's aimed at the ones who need it most, and I think this provides some relief. Again, it's a start. We hope to build on it in the years to come.
Okay. Suzanne from Pomona wants to know, when will low-cost broadband for low-income families become available?
Okay, so Suzanne, this is another program which was in the budget that we passed recently. Was to require telecom companies to make available to low-income households broadband at $15 a month. Because right now we have a real issue in our communities. You need broadband. This is not a luxury anymore. We're not in the 1990s, the AOL and dial-up days. Having broadband internet is something that you need. Kids need it for school at the moment, since we're still in virtual learning. People need it for work. People need it to access the internet in the modern world that we're living in. And so treating this like other essential utilities is an important first step. And so the Senate's and the Assembly and the governor agreed, and the budget includes language that would require utility companies to provide broadband at $15 a month. Should be starting soon. I believe it's in June is when that's going to kick in. And companies will be providing information. This is open to people who are on means-tested programs. Could be food stamps, could be Medicaid, could be things like that, that you're certified that you are struggling. And this is something to help out in communities like that for folks who really need this help to deal with it. We had this terrible issue, again, circling back to East Ramapo, which was reported in the Journal News. There were kids who went months without getting Chromebooks and without the ability to access education. There were kids who got the Chromebooks, but their family didn't have internet because they couldn't afford it. This is something that we've got to address. We can't leave people behind. And I think this is a really important first step in order to prevent us from leaving people behind. And not just in our district, but in other parts of the state. We're lucky, we live in a dense area, suburban area. People can get broadband if you want it. Parts of New York, I talked to some of my colleagues that represent districts upstate. They have huge numbers of their constituents that just can't get it at all because it's so rural. And that's not something that's critical for us in Rockland and Westchester, but everybody in New York should have the ability to access the internet and to access it in a way that helps them. And I think that programs like this really start bringing us and closing that digital divide and bringing us into a more equitable system. We're in the 2020s. We got to be able to get people online.
Okay. Philip from Pearl River asks, communities across New York State and here in Rockland are experiencing a tremendous rise in crime and crime-related activities. Are legislators planning on working with police departments to come up with common sense solutions, or are they simply going to continue this trend of, quote, defund the police or blaming the police for these problems? We can't ignore this issue any longer. There are too many people that feel unsafe in their communities, and many folks in Albany are out of touch.
So I appreciate the question. This is a complicated issue, I'll be honest, because of course we all need to feel safe in our communities. We need to be safe in our communities. And so that is fundamentally what we should be focusing on as legislators, is making sure that people not just feel safe, but that they are safe. And there has been a lot of conversation over criminal justice reform that's taken place over the last couple of years. We had a system that really wasn't working in many respects. We had people who could be charged, two people with the exact same crime, One of them would wait for trial in jail and one of them would wait for trial at home. And the only difference wasn't who was more dangerous, it was who had more money. That's not a system that we should ever want to go back to, but we do need to make sure that as we move forward, we are appropriately balancing the need to keep people safe and to protect the rights of those who have been charged and not convicted with crimes. I would say a couple of things. First of all, I don't support defunding the police. We obviously need to have law enforcement in our communities in order to protect and keep our communities safe. There are reforms that are needed. Especially, we need to make it easier to bring to justice police officers who murder or abuse people of color and really who misuse their authority in any way. But we shouldn't assume that all police are the problem. I don't believe that, and I don't think that most people do believe that. But that said, there is a lot of talk about trying to say that crime is going up and it's because of bail reform. I disagree with that, and I'll tell you why. Because around the country last year, crime went up. It went up in New York, it went up in Connecticut, it went up in Illinois, in California, in Alabama, in Texas, in Florida, in states with Democrats controlling the state, in states with Republicans controlling the state, cities with Democratic mayors, cities with Republican mayors. This isn't a New York issue, and I don't know if any of us have a clear answer about why crime went up like it did. I think COVID might have played a role. I don't think I could say exactly why. I know a lot of people are trying to guess, but the reality is if crime goes up in Alabama at the same time as it's going up in New York, I don't understand how we could say that criminal justice reform in New York caused that rise. So as we go forward and hopefully COVID starts getting us, we move beyond COVID, we get back to normal, I hope that we're going to start to see a decrease, but hope is not enough. I'll be looking very carefully at ways we can continue to keep the focus on this. I've met with local police departments, local sheriff's departments. I'm actually open to ideas and looking to introduce legislation which, when people are charged with illegal gun possession, we've got a massive gun crime problem, as we talked a little bit about, but rates of gun homicides and just rates of people who are shot, even if they recover, is way up over the last couple of years, really the last 15 months in New York and around the country. We need to do something about that. And if there's ways to help keep people off the streets who've been charged with illegal gun possession, I am ready to pursue that. I'm looking to introduce legislation in that area. But again, these are tough questions. And I think there are a lot of people that try to make it a very simple, cut and dry, black and white issue. I think we've got to consider that there's a lot going on here. We need to keep the community safe and we need to keep people's rights protected. And that's what I hope to do.
So Daniel from Nyack wants to know, in the last year, there's been more awareness about police brutality against people of color like George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. Just yesterday, another man in California was killed when a police officer kneeled on him for 5 minutes, just like George Floyd. What is New York doing to address the issues of police violence against Black and Latinx communities? Yeah,
I mean, it is. I watched the video of George Floyd, and now we've seen the same thing happen again. As the questioner mentioned just yesterday, I don't know if everybody's seen this yet another case in California where a 26-year-old man was killed, and I would argue murdered, when a police officer kneeled on him for 5 minutes and he died. We should not ever be okay with this going on in our country. What happened to George Floyd, what happened to this gentleman from California, what happened to Breonna Taylor, to Philandro Castile, to so many other people throughout the United States is a crisis. And this, as I said, I am not somebody that believes that all police officers have a problem with this. I know many people in our local law enforcement agencies who are in it for the right reasons, who truly are looking to protect and serve this community and to keep us safe from dangerous people. I celebrate, I applaud that, but what we absolutely have to find a way to do is to hold people accountable, not just in a couple of extreme cases like Derek Chauvin, the murderer of George Floyd, but in any case where people are exceeding their authority and abusing or killing people, there must be accountability. New York, in the budget, actually, we just had additional language that is going to make it much harder what we've seen happen is officers that might be fired or let go from a department because they've got a record of excessive force, a record of civilian complaints, will get hired by another department. And then the pattern repeats and repeats until you end up with Derek Chauvin murdering George Floyd in cold blood. And so what the New York State budget now will do is, and New York State law, is make it much harder for that to happen by requiring departments to report to the state why people are leaving. And it may be people are leaving because they got a better offer elsewhere, in which case that's great. But if they're leaving because they had a record of abusive, excessive force or anything like that, we need to know that, and police departments need to know that, because I don't think any police department out there would want to be hiring somebody with this kind of a record, because it opens them up to liability and it puts their community at risk. So when I look at these issues, I think we've got to find a way to recognize we've got a lot of good police officers there who are working hard to do their jobs and protect us, but we absolutely need to find a way to figure out who the ones who are abusing their authority are and make sure that they are not in a position where they could abuse or take a life of an innocent member of our community. That's what I'm looking to do with this, and I think we've got to keep these conversations going.
Cheryl from Nanuet wants to know, broken bolts. A Lohud article wrote about the structural problems on the Governor Mario M. Cuomo Bridge and stated that they were covered up. Is this truly a problem? And if so, what are you doing to address this? Will this cause our toll prices to rise?
Well, first of all, I would usually call it the Tappan Zee Bridge, or the new Tappan Zee Bridge, not the Governor Mario Cuomo Bridge. But this was a story that came out in early March from the Albany Times-Union newspaper that did this extensive report. They found that a whistleblower who had been working on the bridge while it was being constructed was reporting that unusually high numbers of the bolts that hold the steel beams and girders that hold the bridge together were failing, were breaking both as they were being installed and after they were being installed. I don't know how many of you saw this story. It is a really concerning story because they quote experts in bridge design and bridge safety raising major concerns about the high rate of bolt failures. So I saw this. I think many of my colleagues in the legislature saw this, and we realized we have got to get to the bottom of this. I've been holding meetings along with a lot of my colleagues in the legislature with the New York State Thruway. For what it's worth, they do say the bridge is completely safe. They are like crystal clear on this. We cannot just take that at face value, but it's important to note that they are really clear that they think it's safe. But nevertheless, we're trying to review the documents they've shared with us. And then last week, Tappan Zee Contractors, who was the outside contractor that built the bridge, has not been nearly as responsive. And they're actually fighting in court to keep this lawsuit sealed, under seal, so we can't find out what the whistleblower was alleging. So I've joined with, I'm the chair of the Senate's Committee on Procurement and Contracts. And so we're supposed to be reviewing exact contracts like this when the state gives a lot of money, billions of dollars, to an outside contractor to build one of our major pieces of infrastructure. I've joined with the Transportation Committee, the Investigations and Government Operations Committee, and one other in the Senate to put an official document request out there to the Tappan Zee contractors who built the bridge and figure out what's going on. We have to get to the bottom of this. Obviously, I think toll rates is something I'm concerned about, but the number one question is guaranteeing to people that the bridge is fully safe to drive on, not just now, and I suspect it is right now, but this is a bridge that was built and was sold as something that could last a century. So we don't want to find that we spent $4 billion on it and 10 years down the line, we got to either replace it or do major repairs. We need a bridge that is going to be sustainably there for the long term. And I am working with all of my colleagues in the legislature to try to get answers on this as soon as possible so that the public can have confidence and we all can have confidence that the bridge is safe for all of us.
So Brian from New City wants to know, the roads in New City and the surrounding areas need to be repaved, not patched. When will this happen?
Yeah, the roads are a mess in many places, unfortunately, Brian. I think probably not just in New City, because everywhere I drive around the district, from Suffern all the way over to Ossining and Briarcliff, I see the same thing. What I will say is that this year's budget, partly to recognize this fact, actually included the biggest increase in state support for local roads that we've seen in many, many years. It was a 30% increase in the money that New York State sends to towns and villages and cities all over the state to help repair local roads. So there are hundreds of thousands of dollars coming back into towns and villages, each, many of them all over our district, which I think will help. There's also additional money coming in for long-term capital projects for the Department of Transportation, because it's not just the local roads that have issues. And I'll be honest, we have great highway departments. We've got, in most of the towns I represent, really hardworking people running these departments, working hard to keep the roads in good shape. But the money is tight. It is, when I first took office as a Nyack Village trustee a couple years ago in 2017, it's amazing how expensive it is to get stuff done when you talk about infrastructure and repaving and rebuilding roads. So we need state support because local communities are taxed out. I don't want to see local governments having to continue to raise taxes over and over again. That's what New York, with our much larger financial resources, we can spread the burden over an entire state and not just put it on a high tax area like Rockland and Westchester. So we're going to see 30% increase in the programs that fund local roads. And I really do think this will help. It lets additional miles be paved each year. And for the larger projects, we'll be working to try to get money coming back in. I know if we've got anybody here from Briarcliff, having the state take some action on Route 9A over there is a major priority for me. It is a mess of a road. It is old, it's curvy, the bridges are too low, trucks keep hitting them. It's a fatal accident waiting to happen. And so I've been prioritizing trying to get the Department of Transportation to do a study. And we have to start with a study, but get it started now so that we can get the money there and we can get this road fixed in a way that makes it safe. It's not just Briarcliff. There's big issues. I know anybody who's driven in the Nyack area on Route 59 and 9W have huge issues. Route 306 over in Ramapo, they've got a lot of pedestrians there, limited sidewalks, limited crosswalks. We need to work to make all of our state roads safe, not just for drivers, but for pedestrians and cyclists as well, because we've had fatal accidents. Every year, we probably have a couple fatal accidents between cars and bikes or cars and pedestrians. We need to do more. We need to fund these projects. And again, I think that's got to be one of our priorities. What's government good for if we can't support infrastructure?
Bonnie and Andrew of Suffern both want to know, as Ramapo residents, the current poor enforcement of the building codes has become dangerous to life and limb. What can be done at the state level to ensure these codes are enforced?
So the question about building codes, yeah, I mean, building codes are a lot of it is a local issue, but there's still stuff the state can do. And we've seen, I think the questioner asked about Ramapo. This has been a problem in Ramapo. It's been a problem in other areas too. When I worked with Senator Skoufis, who chairs the investigations committee, we actually conducted an investigation into code enforcement all around New York State. Ramapo was one of the places we looked at, also Albany, Mount Vernon, Newburgh, and other communities. And what we found is this is an issue in many cases. There are buildings that get converted in ways that put the residents at risk, that put the first responders at risk, and that is a huge problem. So there's legislation I support that would do a couple of things, a couple different bills. So one bill would increase the minimum penalties for illegal conversions of buildings that put first responders' lives at risk. We just lost a hero last month, Jared Lloyd, who gave his life saving people from this fire at the Evergreen Court home in Spring Valley. And that's a building, I don't know yet if we know about what code violations might have been there, but there are others like that. And I've talked to volunteer firefighters throughout the district, and they'll tell you this is a matter of time before something like this happens, before we lose a brother or sister firefighter who's going into a burning building and gets trapped because there was a wall where there wasn't supposed to be a wall, or a door was blocked. Right now, we've got maximum fines, but we don't have minimum fines that can really do much good. And so a lot of times you'll have cases, the Journal News reported on this just recently with a supermarket in Ramapo, where minimum fines were given, $1,000 after, months of litigation, and it becomes the cost of doing business. And I don't think anybody out there wants to see a firefighter lose their life. They don't want to see any of our people lose their lives, but we've got to take this more seriously. And so legislation like this, while it is the responsibility fundamentally of local governments to enforce building and fire codes, it's got to be the state's responsibility to give them the tools they need. I've proposed increasing, along with many of my colleagues, state support for code enforcement, additional resources. When we did this investigation, the city of Mount Vernon, which has 70,000 people, had one code enforcement officer. And just think about that. I mean, there is no way that they would have been able to get to what they needed to get to. And that is not unique in New York State. So we have issues in this district. We have statewide issues with this that need to be addressed. I've also supported legislation which would let a county petition the state if they can prove that a village or a town is not able to handle code enforcement, to take that over for a period of time. I think that's also something we have to consider. We value home rule, letting local governments run their own affairs in New York, but we've also got to recognize that these are matters of life and death importance, and we've got to get it right. So I think it's a great question. I also, again, have to encourage people, continue to talk to local governments, because certainly the easiest way to get this is to have local governments get it right, but the state's got to be a backstop if that's not working.
Okay, we have a question from the Q&A section. It is from Terry. Last year, the New York State Senate and Assembly passed a bill that someone would be selected to represent the people and not corporate America on the Public Service Commission. This legislation is supported by the AARP. The governor never signed the bill. Whenever Suez or O&R upgrade, we, the citizens, face another increase. We, the residents in Rockland County, have been between a rock and a hard place. Is it possible to pass this bill again this year before Suez rates states another increase to fix the water chemical problem?
Again, we got some really good questions coming in. And I actually submitted comments just today with the O&R rate increase, where they're proposing yet another rate increase. And I submitted my comments in opposition to that. It is a shame. The governor has vetoed some really good legislation. And one of the things I'm pushing for, many of you may or may not know, we now have a supermajority in the state legislature, in the Assembly and the Senate, 2/3 of the legislature, Democratic supermajority. And that means that we could override the governor's vetoes if we choose to. I really think we should in cases like this. I know that there has been a culture in Albany for many years of not overriding vetoes, even for bills that pass unanimously. And this is one that, although I mentioned the Democratic supermajority, I don't know any Republicans out there that want to pay higher water bills or want to pay higher, utility bills either. This is a bipartisan and a nonpartisan issue. The Senate actually has passed this legislation again this year. I was proud to support it. I hope the Assembly will as well. And I think we've got to lobby the governor to say, sign the bill. I mean, this is common sense. We should have people representing consumers who are making these decisions, because we're the ones who are paying electric rates and water rates that keep going up. That's it. I mean, this is not rocket science. And I hope that we can get this through, and I hope the governor will do the right thing and sign it.
Okay. So Jane from Congers wants to know, we are concerned that the amount the state is spending will drive away businesses and force jobs to leave the state. What is the state doing to reduce spending?
Okay, so Jane, I hear that. And I think that what we have to be aware of is that there's a lot going on in New York right now with businesses particularly. This budget includes $1 billion in relief for our small businesses. It includes $800 million in grants, not loans, grants that will go to small business. And this is on top of billions of dollars in support from the federal government. New York's money is to help businesses that either didn't qualify for some reason or didn't get enough assistance from Washington, from the Paycheck Protection Program and other federal programs, to make money available to them. There's an additional $200 million in tax credits to businesses. And I want to note some of this business assistance, particularly to help restaurants that were in these like red and yellow zones that the governor set up, help them get back on their feet. We shouldn't be spending any money that's not necessary, and that's clear. I question whether people are leaving the state because of spending. I think that people are leaving the state when they can't afford to be here. And that's why I think it's so important. We talked about some of the tax relief issues that have been in the budget. The property tax circuit breaker program, the aid to schools, which is leading districts to put a 0% increase in place, the aid to local governments, which I hope will allow them to cut back as well on their tax increases. And one thing we didn't mention is the middle class income tax cuts, which the governor wanted to delay. And that was his proposal, that we do not need a middle class income tax cut this year. Luckily, all of us in the legislature, Democrats, Republicans, said this is crazy. We need middle class income tax relief. And so it will continue. This year, as it continues to phase in, every year through 2024, decreasing the tax rates on people earning under $250,000. That to me is the focus. We should be looking carefully at spending. We should certainly be looking carefully at taxes, though, because ultimately we need to keep businesses here and we need to make it as easy as possible. That's why I've supported efforts like these grant programs to help businesses get back on their feet so that they can afford to stay in New York, they can afford to stay open, and we help out. Businesses need a workforce. They need an educated workforce. And that's why when we've got schools that are, schools that are well funded, higher education systems that people can get a good education. If you are a business looking to choose whether to locate in New York or locate someplace else, yes, you look at taxes, but you also look at quality of services. And if you know that we can get good infrastructure and a well-educated workforce, that is something that is going to factor into your decision really heavily. And every study I've seen suggests that. But we have to look closely at spending always. We should never just assume that because we spent it before, we need to spend it again. And I don't think most people do. We have to consider this. And the state budget this year, I know there's been a lot of press because the number $200 billion, over $200 billion is a high number. A lot of that money, we should realize, is money that is coming to us from Washington and is not directly coming in from New York State. But nevertheless, it's a good question. I understand where it's coming from, and I know a lot of people have these concerns.
Okay, so Brian from Suffern wants to know, what is the current status of the New York Health Act, and what do we need to do to get it enacted?
So New York Health Act has been introduced. It's a bill that I co-sponsor, and it would ensure that every New Yorker has affordable and high quality health care and is covered, because we've seen this year in a pandemic, it's the worst time imaginable to have people going without health care. So I hope we can pass this. We need universal health care for people in New York State. Nobody should be going without it. And so I think there is a lot of work to do to make that case to people, to understand that this is a bill which will help middle class and working people in our state. It'll help everybody afford to have health care and make sure that people are covered. So I support it. I encourage people who live in other parts of the state, well, everybody lives here, but if you know people that live in other parts of the state, have them talk to their legislators as well. We all have friends, we all have family, and that's true for this bill and anything. If your legislator agrees with you, sometimes people say, well, that's it, I've done my job. It's not it. If you have a family member in the city, if you've got a cousin upstate, ask them and talk to them and tell them to reach out to their assemblyman or their state senator about this or anything else. Because I think we clearly have seen what happens when people don't have access to care. And there were people that put off going to see a doctor and then passed away from COVID. And this is, in a wealthy state, in a wealthy country, that is not acceptable. We should not accept that as the status quo. And I hope that we can move on the New York Health Act and get universal health care for all of us in New York State.
Okay, we have time for one more question.
Great.
That will be from Mia from Valley Cottage. Robocalls, scam calls, etc. We get up to 10 calls a day and we need a reliable way to stop them. How can you help?
They're so annoying. They're so annoying. I've probably I see my phone going over there, and who knows, it might be somebody calling to tell me that my car warranty is expired and I need to extend it. It is a huge issue. And the challenge with this is that it's illegal. The state has passed laws against it. The federal government has passed laws against it. And a lot of these scammers, they're based overseas, or they just do it anyway and hope they don't get caught because the federal government doesn't have the resources to catch them. So it is a huge problem. What I can say is that the New York State legislature has moved legislation which would require your phone company to make call blocking software available to your phone and help you set that up. Because there are programs that can make it a little bit better. Doesn't help with landlines quite as much, unfortunately, but for cells, it can really help. One of the problems is, we used to have the do not call registry. I think probably many of us signed up for it. These people aren't getting your number from any real source of they're not looking it up online. They're not getting it like that. They have computer programs now that can dial millions of numbers a day, and they just randomly put numbers in until they hit a live person, and then they'll try to sign you up or to scam you. And it is just like, it's so annoying. I mean, I've had, my phone rings when I'm in a meeting, my phone rings when I'm eating dinner, when I'm trying to watch TV, and I know we've all had this. The federal government, I hope, can do more because unfortunately, most of these companies aren't operating in New York. And many of them are just willfully violating the law and hoping that they don't get caught. But I hope we can do as much as we can with the cell companies, helping people with call blocking technology, and then urge your federal representatives, make this a priority. We need the FCC at the federal level to really make this a priority. The U.S. Attorney General to try to track these people down and not just hit them with a fine. I'd love to put people in jail in a case like this if they've been wasting our time and scamming us. My office has gotten, calls from dozens of people just in the first 4 months I've been in office who have been either the victims of scams or attempted scam victims. Please be aware, there are so many people out there that are trying to cheat you out of your money. If somebody calls up on the phone out of the blue, ask for your information, whether it's your credit card information, your social security, even if they say they're calling from the government. We've had people say they got a call from somebody that said they were with Social Security or the IRS or the DMV. That's not how government agencies work. They're not just going to call you up out of the blue and ask for your social security number. So please be aware of that. Don't give your information out over the phone. And if you're not sure whether it's legitimate or not, you could call our office, or you could call the local police and ask them as well. Which actually, I know we're running out of time, but I do want to mention, if you need help, whether it's with the DMV, Easy Pass, unemployment, which is just a disaster of a system right now, rental assistance, things like that, any state program, please reach out to my office. We have 2 offices in our district, one at 20 South Main Street and one at 2 Church Street in Ossining. The offices are open. They are ready to help you. Call us, 845-623-3627. That's our main number. It'll bounce to wherever you are, whether it's Westchester or Rockland. We can try to help. Can never promise anything, but I can promise you that my staff, we have a great staff. Pascal is our outreach director. I have a team of 9 other people that are here, full-time, looking to help the residents of our district. Whether you need help with any of these problems or have any other questions, if you want to know, if you had a question that I didn't get to tonight, and I know we've covered, I think, a lot of ground, can never get to everything. If you had a question that you didn't get answered, call us up, send me an email. My email is reichlin@nysenate.gov. It's REICHLIN@nysenate.gov. Please send me an email. You can follow, take a look at our social media. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram. If you want to keep up with what I'm doing or just ask a question or make a comment, I read my emails. I follow my social media. I'm going to see it. I really try very hard to make sure that I'm in touch with what people in the district, have questions about and need to know. So I hope to be able to see many of you in person sometime soon. We have a big district and we still have this pandemic, but I know we're making headway. We're getting to the end of it. And I just want to thank you all for joining tonight. I know our lives are busy. You may have, getting, dinner ready, helping your kids with homework, helping your parents, whatever it may be. I appreciate you taking the time to join us tonight or to watch on Facebook Live later. And again, I just really want to thank you for being here. And it is a true pleasure. It's just the honor of my life to be able to represent you in Albany, and to have that privilege to do your work and to support you and to try to fight for Rockland and Westchester counties up in our state government. So I thank you so much. Have a wonderful night.